In my 20 years of nursing, I had never received a single disciplinary action. That was until I discovered how Dr. Whitmore was deleting post-surgical complications from patient records. When they fired me as staff who don't follow protocols, I had the real medical records of 47 patients in my possession. After the media saw these documents, the hospital scandal dominated national headlines for 3 months. My name is Derek Sullivan, and I'm about to tell you how 2 decades of dedication to patient care led me to uncover one of the most disturbing medical cover-ups in recent history. I started my nursing career in 2003 at Northgate Medical Center, a prestigious private hospital in the suburbs of Chicago. Fresh out of nursing school with a Bachelor of Science in Nursing, I was eager to make a difference in patients' lives and contribute to a healthcare system I believed prioritized healing above all else. Riverside was considered one of the premier medical facilities in the region. State-of-the-art equipment, renowned physicians, and a reputation for excellence that attracted patients from across the Midwest. As a new graduate, I felt privileged to begin my career in such an esteemed institution. My first assignment was in the post-surgical recovery unit, working under the supervision of experienced nurses who taught me the intricacies of patient care, medication management, and the critical observation skills that could mean the difference between life and death for recovering patients. The work was demanding but rewarding. 12-hour shifts monitoring vital signs, administering medications, coordinating with physicians, and providing comfort to patients and their families during vulnerable moments. Every day brought new challenges and opportunities to apply my training in real-world situations. Dr. Charles Whitmore was the chief of cardiovascular surgery, a position he had held for over 15 years. He was considered one of the most skilled cardiac surgeons in the region, with a reputation for taking on complex cases that other surgeons might decline. His success rate was impressive, and his patients often spoke about him with deep gratitude and respect. In my early years at Riverside, I worked with Dr. Whitmore on numerous occasions. He was professional, knowledgeable, and seemed genuinely committed to patient welfare. His surgical techniques were precise, and his post-operative care protocols were thorough and well-documented. As I gained experience and took on more responsibilities, I was promoted to senior staff nurse and eventually became the lead nurse for the cardiovascular recovery unit. This role gave me greater access to patient records, surgical reports, and the administrative processes that track patient outcomes and hospital performance metrics. It was in this capacity that I first began to notice irregularities in how certain patient cases were documented and reported. The first incident that caught my attention occurred in the summer of 2019. A 68-year-old patient named Margaret Chen had undergone a complex cardiac bypass procedure performed by Dr. Whitmore. The surgery had appeared successful initially, but Mrs. Chen developed complications during her recovery that required additional interventions and extended her hospital stay significantly. What troubled me was the discrepancy between what I had observed during Mrs. Chen's recovery and what appeared in her official medical record. The documentation showed a routine recovery with no significant complications, despite the fact that I had personally assisted with emergency procedures to address bleeding issues and respiratory problems that had prolonged her hospitalization. When I questioned the charge nurse about the documentation, she suggested that perhaps I was misremembering the details or confusing this case with another patient. Given my relative inexperience with complex cardiac cases at the time, I accepted her explanation and didn't pursue the matter further. Over the following months, however, I began to notice similar patterns with other patients under Dr. Whitmore's care. Post-surgical complications that I had witnessed firsthand were either minimized in the official records or omitted entirely. Recovery times were reported as shorter than they actually were, and additional procedures required to address complications were sometimes not documented at all. The most concerning case occurred in early 2020. A 55-year-old construction worker named Robert Martinez had undergone valve replacement surgery. During his recovery, Mr. Martinez experienced severe bleeding that required him to be rushed back to the operating room for emergency repair. The incident was serious enough that his family was called to the hospital and informed that his condition was critical. Fortunately, Dr. Whitmore was able to successfully address the bleeding, and Mr. Martinez eventually made a full recovery. However, when I reviewed his medical records weeks later, there was no mention of the emergency surgery or the life-threatening complications he had experienced. This time, I decided to investigate more thoroughly. I began keeping my own informal notes about patient cases, documenting what I observed during recoveries, and comparing those observations to the official medical records. The pattern that emerged was troubling and consistent. Dr. Whitmore appeared to be systematically editing patient records to remove or minimize documentation of post-surgical complications, emergency interventions, and extended recovery times. The result was a medical record that painted a picture of surgical outcomes that were far more successful and complication-free than what actually occurred. The implications were serious on multiple levels. Accurate medical records are essential for patient care, quality improvement, and medical research. They're also crucial for regulatory compliance, insurance reporting, and legal protection for both patients and healthcare providers. By manipulating these records, Dr. Whitmore was not only compromising patient care, but also potentially violating federal healthcare regulations and exposing the hospital to significant legal liability. I struggled with how to address my concerns. Dr. Whitmore was a highly respected surgeon with significant influence within the hospital administration. As a nurse, I was concerned about the potential professional consequences of challenging his practices, especially without definitive proof of wrongdoing. My opportunity for action came in the spring of 2021 when I was assigned to train a new nurse named Jennifer Walsh, who was joining our cardiovascular unit. Jennifer was a recent graduate with excellent academic credentials and a strong commitment to patient advocacy. During her orientation, Jennifer observed the same discrepancies I had been noticing. Unlike me, however, she didn't hesitate to ask direct questions about why the medical records didn't match what we were observing in patient care. "Derek, I'm confused about the Martinez case from last week," she said one afternoon. "I was here when they rushed him back to surgery for the bleeding, but there's nothing in his chart about complications or additional procedures." Her question forced me to confront the situation I had been avoiding for months. "I've noticed some inconsistencies in documentation as well," I admitted. "I think we need to be more systematic about tracking these cases." Together, Jennifer and I began documenting every case we observed where there appeared to be discrepancies between actual patient outcomes and official medical records. We were careful to focus only on factual observations and to maintain strict confidentiality about our concerns. Over the course of 6 months, we identified 47 cases where post-surgical complications had occurred but were either minimized or completely omitted from the official medical records. The cases range from minor issues like extended recovery times to serious complications, including emergency surgeries, infections, and life-threatening bleeding incidents. The pattern was clear and systematic. Dr. Whitmore was routinely editing patient records to present a more favorable picture of his surgical outcomes than what actually occurred. In November 2021, I made the decision to report my concerns through the hospital's official channels. I submitted a detailed report to the nursing supervisor outlining the documentation discrepancies I had observed and requesting a formal review of Dr. Whitmore's patient records. The response was swift and decisive, but not in the way I had expected. 3 days after submitting my report, I was called into a meeting with the nursing director, the chief medical officer, and a representative from Human Resources. Instead of discussing my concerns about patient record manipulation, they informed me that my performance as a nurse had come under scrutiny. "Derek, we've received reports that you've been accessing patient records outside your assigned duties and questioning the medical judgments of attending physicians," said Dr. Patricia Romano, the chief medical officer. "This behavior is inconsistent with professional nursing standards and hospital policies." I was stunned. I submitted a report about documentation irregularities that I believed needed investigation. That's part of my responsibility as a healthcare professional. Your role is to provide nursing care, not to second-guess the medical decisions of board-certified surgeons, she replied. "Dr. Whitmore has expressed concerns about your behavior and its impact on unit morale and patient confidence." The meeting concluded with a formal reprimand being placed in my personnel file and a warning that further insubordinate behavior would result in termination. I left the meeting feeling defeated and concerned about the implications for patient safety. It was clear that the hospital administration was more interested in protecting Dr. Whitmore's reputation than investigating legitimate concerns about patient care and record keeping. Jennifer, who had been my partner in documenting the cases, was transferred to a different unit within the week. When I tried to discuss the situation with her, she informed me that she had been warned to avoid any further involvement in unfounded allegations against medical staff. Over the following months, my work environment became increasingly hostile. My shifts were changed to less desirable times, my patient assignments were reduced, and I was excluded from training opportunities and committee assignments that had previously been part of my responsibilities. The message was clear. I was being pushed out of Northgate Medical Center for raising concerns about patient care quality and medical record integrity. The final confrontation came in March 2022. During a particularly busy shift, I observed Dr. Whitmore performing what appeared to be a routine valve repair on a 72-year-old woman named Dorothy Williams. The surgery was scheduled to take approximately 3 hours, but complications arose that extended the procedure to over 6 hours. Mrs. Williams experienced significant bleeding during the surgery that required multiple transfusions and additional surgical interventions. Her recovery was complicated by infection and respiratory issues that required intensive care support for over a week. Despite these serious complications, Dr. Whitmore's operative report described the surgery as uncomplicated with excellent patient outcomes and routine post-operative recovery. I couldn't remain silent about such a blatant misrepresentation of a patient's medical care. I submitted another formal report documenting the discrepancies between what I had observed and what appeared in Mrs. Williams' medical record. This time, the hospital's response was immediate and final. I was called into Human Resources the next morning and informed that my employment was being terminated effective immediately for failure to follow hospital protocols and continued insubordination regarding medical staff decisions. "Derek, you've been a valued member of our nursing staff for many years," said Helen Foster, the Human Resources Director. "However, your recent behavior has become disruptive to hospital operations and inconsistent with our professional standards." I was escorted from the building that same day with my personal belongings packed into boxes and my access to hospital systems immediately revoked. But they made one crucial mistake. During my years of documenting the discrepancies in Dr. Whitmore's cases, I had been careful to maintain backup copies of my observations and supporting documentation. These files included copies of original surgical notes before they were edited, photographs of patient charts showing complications that were later removed, and detailed timelines of actual patient recovery experiences compared to what appeared in final medical records. I had stored these files on my personal devices and cloud storage accounts, anticipating that there might come a time when I would need independent documentation of what I had observed. After my termination, I spent several weeks organizing this documentation and considering my options. The evidence was compelling and detailed, showing a clear pattern of systematic medical record manipulation that spanned multiple years and affected dozens of patients. I consulted with a healthcare attorney who specializes in whistleblower cases. After reviewing my documentation, she confirmed that what I had uncovered appeared to constitute serious violations of federal healthcare regulations and potentially criminal fraud. "Derek, what you've documented here is extremely serious," said attorney Sarah Chun. "If these allegations are accurate, Dr. Whitmore and potentially the hospital administration could face significant legal consequences, including criminal charges and civil liability." She explained that healthcare fraud investigations typically involve multiple federal agencies, including the Department of Health and Human Services, the Food and Drug Administration, and in some cases the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The first step is to file formal complaints with the appropriate regulatory agencies and provide them with your documentation, she advised. Given the potential scope of this case, I expect they'll launch a comprehensive investigation. I filed complaints with the state medical board, the hospital licensing authority, and the federal agencies responsible for healthcare oversight. Each complaint included detailed documentation of the 47 cases I had identified, along with supporting evidence showing the pattern of record manipulation. The response was more dramatic than I had anticipated. Within 6 weeks of filing my complaints, federal investigators arrived at Northgate Medical Center with search warrants for Dr. Whitmore's patient records, computer systems, and administrative files. The investigation was front-page news in local newspapers and became a major story on regional television news programs. Dr. Whitmore was suspended from his position pending the outcome of the investigation. The hospital's board of directors announced that they were conducting their own internal review of medical record-keeping practices and patient care quality measures. As the investigation progressed, additional evidence emerged that corroborated my allegations. Other nurses and medical staff came forward with their own observations about questionable practices in Dr. Whitmore's cases. Hospital computer logs showed patterns of record editing that aligned with my documentation of case discrepancies. Most importantly, interviews with former patients and their families revealed the real impact of the record manipulation. Many patients had experienced serious complications and extended recoveries that had never been properly documented or reported to their insurance companies or other healthcare providers. The investigation concluded 8 months later with dramatic results. Dr. Whitmore was charged with healthcare fraud, insurance fraud, and falsification of medical records. The charges involved over 60 cases spanning 7 years, far more than the 47 cases I had originally identified. Northgate Medical Center was fined $2.3 million for regulatory violations and was required to implement comprehensive reforms to their medical record keeping and quality assurance processes. 3 hospital administrators, including the chief medical officer who had ignored my initial reports, were terminated. Most importantly, the affected patients were contacted and informed about the true nature of their medical care. Many filed civil lawsuits against both Dr. Whitmore and the hospital, seeking compensation for the additional medical expenses and emotional distress caused by the cover-up of their complications. The case became a major news story that was covered by national media outlets. The systematic nature of the record manipulation and the hospital's efforts to silence whistleblowing staff made it a significant case study in healthcare ethics and patient safety. Dr. Whitmore eventually pleaded guilty to multiple charges and was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. His medical license was permanently revoked, and he was ordered to pay $1.8 million in restitution to affected patients. 6 months after the investigation concluded, I received a call from the interim chief medical officer at Northgate Medical Center. "Derek, the board of directors would like to offer you your position back, along with a promotion to nursing supervisor and compensation for the wrongful termination," she said. "We recognize that your actions were motivated by legitimate patient safety concerns and that the hospital failed to respond appropriately to your reports." I declined their offer. Instead, I had accepted a position with the state health department as a healthcare quality investigator, where my experience with medical record fraud would help protect patients throughout the region. The experience taught me that speaking up for patient safety sometimes requires personal sacrifice, but that healthcare professionals have a fundamental obligation to ensure that medical care is accurately documented and reported. Today, I work to investigate similar cases of healthcare fraud and to train medical staff about the importance of accurate record keeping and the legal protections available to healthcare workers who report quality and safety concerns. Dr. Whitmore's case became a landmark example of how systematic medical record manipulation can compromise patient care and how healthcare institutions sometimes prioritize reputation protection over patient safety. But it also demonstrated that individual healthcare workers can make a difference when they have the courage to document problems and persist in seeking appropriate solutions, even when institutional pressure discourages them from speaking up. The 47 patients whose real medical experiences I documented deserved to have their complications acknowledged and properly treated. They deserved accurate medical records that could guide their future care and protect them from similar problems. Sometimes the most important part of healthcare isn't the surgery or the medication. Sometimes it's simply telling the truth about what actually happened and ensuring that patients receive the honest, accurate care they deserve. That's a lesson that's worth defending, no matter what the personal cost might be.